Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are excited to have our next guest joining us here today live on the Zoomcast as well as the podcast. And she's a life coach, coaching with Shurone. And she really is helping so many people ditch alcohol for the life of your dreams. So, coaching with Shurone, that's spelled SHURONE.com. And Shurone Hills joins us live here today. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you back. Are you currently in Utah still?
Yes, I'm still in Salt Lake City, Utah, hiking
Beautiful.
lots of mountains.
Oh, that's wonderful. We're going to talk about, those things help people as well, right? The positive mindset. And we got to learn to take care of our bodies, our insides, our outsides. And I know you've had your own share of experiences, which brought you here today. So let me start off by having you just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about, you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay. So, yes, my name is Shurone Hills, and where to start the story, right? I guess, I guess I'll start when I was a child. I was never taught, like most of us, how to handle my emotions, and that was something that was never mentioned and never taught to me. So I had a couple of things happen to me in my childhood that were a little rough, and I didn't know how to handle them. And so later on in life, when I discovered alcohol, it was like this magical savior in a way for me, that allowed me to escape my emotions and to not have to deal with them. And I think for a lot of people, we find ourselves in that place where we start using alcohol more and more to cover up how we're feeling or to not feel and to escape our emotions. And of course, it took quite a long time for me to get to the point where alcohol became, I was addicted to it physically. That was a process. But basically, I found alcohol when I was in college, and I thought that it was the answer to all of my problems. And it was fun for a couple of years. And then I realized that I had this like not problem, but that I really loved alcohol. And that is when I found somebody that also loved alcohol, even more than me, and drank a little bit more than me, so that I wouldn't have to feel guilty about it. And I found my husband, and he and I drank together, and we ended up drinking just at our house and just isolating. It was no longer fun. We were drinking every day, and I ended up drinking about 30 beers every day just to get by. Just I remember I kept a job thankfully throughout this time. And it was only because I worked for my dad, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I would come into work and I would have to have like 6 beers before I could like not shake to write out checks. Um, and so I was pretty addicted to it eventually, and I thought that I kind of figured out how to make it work. If I didn't drink hard alcohol, I was okay and I could still kind of function. And if I could
Mm-hmm.
have a couple throughout the day, then I wouldn't be shaky. Um, but I came home one day, and my husband was working nights. He'd figured out a job where he could drink too as a security guard. But I saw my husband standing by our computer one morning, and he looked like he was like 8 months pregnant. And he wasn't a big guy, so I knew something was wrong. And I Googled, and it came up with cirrhosis as being a plausible explanation for this. And and my whole life kind of changed. I realized that I hadn't figured it out, and this was going to kill me if I continued on this way. And I spoke briefly about this in our a couple of episodes
Yeah.
ago, but yeah, we successfully quit for a little while, and then I started drinking again because it wasn't I wasn't the one with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and And eventually my husband started drinking again too. And also the doctors told him that he was doing better, which was the worst thing
Ah,
they could ever told him. Um, and yeah, because it's so easy to get back into that pattern, into that cycle of drinking, especially when you're filled with guilt and shame like I was.
yeah.
And so yeah, we went back and he eventually did lose his life to alcohol, to cirrhosis of the liver, which is what happens when we get addicted physically to alcohol. Um, and yeah, he was 44 years old,
Ah.
pretty healthy, other than the alcohol, of course. So yeah, and he drank beer. He didn't really drink hard alcohol. So I like to tell people that it's just a um it's a very addictive substance, and sometimes we lose sight of that because it's so socially accepted in our society. So then, after my husband died, I had actually quit drink. I'd moved out of our house about a month before that. I realized that I didn't think we could do it together. And in that time, I think he got worse. And I'm not exactly sure what happened because I wasn't there. But after he died, I really everything had already changed when I quit, but that really cemented in my head that I needed to figure this out. And I was worried and nervous that I would go back to drinking too. And so at this point, I started doing all the research. I went to AA. I read a ton of books and I continue to read all the latest stuff about addiction. And it's just become a passion of mine trying to help people out of this cave, out of this dark place.
Well, I commend your story. I appreciate you sharing this with us. And I know it's not easy to talk about. And, I get to see you here face to face today. And I commend you on, not everybody can come to this conclusion and realize it and have this second chance at life. So, unfortunately, not for for him, for you. But here you are now taking the bad that happened to you and helping so many. So, the fact you can really empathize with your clients because you've walked this walk is just, it's beautiful. So we appreciate that. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And at this time, I know I just want to make sure we do establish the ways we can contact you before we continue. Could you share the
Okay.
website one more time?
Yes, I'd love to. My website is www.coachingwithshurone.com. And again, my name is spelled Shurone. And that is where you can find out how to work with me. There's a couple of different ways. And I've also got a webinar coming up next Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern time, where people can come talk to me. I'm going to talk about the first step to quitting alcohol, and you can come ask me questions, anything you want. And also, let's see what else. You can email me at
Mhm.
coachingwithsharon at gmail.com. And then my phone number, if you want to reach out to me, is 801-792-4292.
Beautiful. And also, you mentioned your sister was kind of inspirational to you, right? She helped you. Um, And also, you mentioned the teachings of Brooke Castillo. Could you share a little bit about
Yeah.
that and then the coaching and the podcast and how you got here?
Yeah, so I started hanging out with a lot of people in AA to begin with originally because that's all I could really kind of find in the community, as far as support went. And AA is awesome for that. I love AA. And then, so what happened was my sister had started listening to another podcast, and and it was all about kind of similar veins of things as I was learning in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so she shared with me one day, and we started listening to this coaching, which I'd never really heard about before, and thought work. And I instantly fell in love with it. And it took my recovery and the things that I was learning to that next level. And so I'm very grateful for my sister to introducing me to Brooke Castillo, who is my mentor and a beautiful, wonderful life coach. She's got a very famous podcast called the Life Coach School podcast. And I learned all about how to handle and deal with my emotions from this woman who had gone through some stuff herself and trying to figure out some stuff. And it was so beautiful learning that I was the one. I was the one creating it all, and that I could choose and change the way that I was thinking about myself, most importantly, and my life. Um, I had a lot of really questionable thoughts about myself and a lot of negative, um, really dark stuff after 15 years of drinking 30 beers a day. My
Wow.
self-talk was pretty bad. And
Mm-hmm.
she helped me out of that. And she
Aw,
allowed me to see my worth and my value again and
beautiful.
to begin to love myself, possibly for the first time in my life. And that has really everything changed for me when I learned from her.
Ah. Well, thank you for sharing that inspiration. And I also, just wanted to ask a question, hope you don't mind, but when after your husband was diagnosed and he knew he was really that ill, did he eventually stop drinking? Was he able to reflect upon anything before he passed about maybe he shouldn't have done this, or did he have that remorse period at all?
Yeah, I definitely. And he had tried many times to quit before too.
Oh,
And we did quit when he found out he had cirrhosis,
okay.
because that's pretty scary, it's a
Yeah.
death sentence.
Yeah.
And so we did quit. And I don't, because my memory is a little fuzzy around that time. But it was a month or two that we were able to not drink. But it is so difficult to do that on your own.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and without any tools and without any help, we
Uh,
really just I felt like we did, looking back, didn't have much of
yeah.
a chance. And
Well,
you can try and want to quit and really
yeah.
want it with your whole heart and not be able to if you're physically addicted. It's a really hard place to get out of.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm just curious because, some people say they don't realize till the end. And it's like, I wish I could have, would have, but that's also inspiring to know that, hey, maybe I should listen to, this man. Maybe, it's just, again, I commend you. I can
Yeah.
only imagine your loss and what you had to come through. And here you are helping others now with their loss or soon to be loss, right? So give me some examples of the
Yes.
type of coaching that people what they're going through, please.
Yeah, so that's one thing that I really love to be able to help people with is there's this notion out there, this idea that you have to hit rock bottom before you can quit drinking. And I don't believe that that is true. I just think that people at that point get desperate enough to quit. But it's so great when people are able to recognize that it is creating problems in their lives before they get to that point, before they get to the point where they have serious health problems and things like that, that does propel people to quit eventually. And so I love to be able to coach people that are not quite um, quite there yet because they still have some spark and some and really I shouldn't say that I have a favorite. I like coaching anywhere, any people from wherever they're at. Um, but I find that a lot of people actually, when they are at that bottom place, they're not looking for coaching because they're mentally like unable to do that. I don't think I would have been able to look at myself and my thoughts necessarily right at the very beginning. So when people do come to me that are addicted physically to alcohol, I will still talk to them and coach them, but often it's a little bit more helpful if they come to me after they've detoxed and gone through that process first. Um, but yeah, as far as specific examples of coaching, let's see. I have a client right now that I really love, and she is pretty new still, but she's kind of discovering that like the power that she has and the ways in which she's been wrong about herself, which is so fun to be a part of and to see the lights turn on and to see people recognize where they maybe be believing into stories that aren't true about themselves. And um, for example, she is like a lot of my clients and had labeled herself as a bad person and thought that she was somehow morally wrong or there was something wrong with her because she couldn't stop drinking. And it's so nice to be able to let people know that that is not the case and that they are dealing with a substance that is addictive, highly
Mm-hmm.
addictive, and that is a toxin. And we
Yeah.
think that we have this control over it, but really, it's not. Alcohol is so addictive that it has a lot of control over us, and it's making decisions for us often that we're not consciously making for ourselves. And just showing her that she is not a bad person and that she
Mm-hmm.
is a victim of the substance
Yep.
that has been taught to her and shown that it is fine to drink. I think most
Yep.
of us have been taught that.
Mm-hmm.
I recently read that 90% of adults drink alcohol, and so that's a big number.
Yeah.
You know, that's really a sign that we have completely embraced alcohol and that it is part of our culture and that it's okay to drink it. But really, from my research and from what I've done, it's the number one cause of problems and death and issues when we're looking at drugs and addictive things. Alcohol is the top, the very worst as far as the things that it does to us. And I want to say too that addiction to anything, they're all very similar and they all become problems when we're
Mm-hmm.
using them to cover up our emotions and how we feel.
Yep.
So it could be like a drug or even like work or Facebook or anything really that gets you out of feeling your emotions. So I do work with other people that have like drug addictions sometimes too. It's not just alcohol because they're all so related and so similar.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing that. And also, I just love hearing, how you're helping so many. Now, we talk about alcohol as an addiction. Do you also work with others who are addicted to drugs, any type of substance abuse, or is it strictly just those you work with that do have an alcohol problem?
Yeah, I mainly work with women that have alcohol problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where my heart is. But I will help anyone that has a problem with any sort of addiction right now, because like I said, they're all very similar and they become issues for us when we don't know how to feel and we don't know how to handle our emotions. Because if you're anything like me, I was never taught anything about that, and I don't think most of us are. So.
You also have a first step to quitting alcohol discussion coming up. Could you share a little bit about that and how we can find out more about that?
Yeah, visit my website, www.coachingwithshurone.com to sign up. There's a couple of different spots on there to where you can sign up for that. And it's a really, I want it to be a little bit of teaching and then a discussion about the first steps and helping people because I think a lot of what stops people from taking that first step is fear, the fear of what will my life be like without alcohol. I know that for me, that was a big fear. It had become such a large, huge part of my life that it had little feelers into all the areas of my life, into my even my work and my all my relationships. It had woven in there. And so the first step is really facing that fear and looking at what that looks like and kind of discovering that we're much stronger than we think we are.
Oh, that's amazing. And you are working with those all over, right? Your coaching takes you to all different states, different countries, even, I'm sure, right?
Yes, I coach over Zoom, so that allows me to coach anyone. And what a beautiful thing.
Yeah, well,
It's
it's
great. I
also
get to meet
beautiful.
people.
Get to meet a lot of people, right? Well, like this person on your
Yeah.
website said, a few years ago, I met a lady that changed my way of thinking. Sharon took the time to show and explain that I can read, I can stay sober, and I can keep my obesity at bay. With her coaching skills, she has explained how my everyday thoughts could change, and change they have. My life is not the same. I truly understand me and me why. Coaching with Sharon has enhanced my life. Thank you. Excuse me, that's just one of the positive testimonials. Did you want to, talk about who that is without their name, but anything in particular from that person you recall?
Yeah. This is one of my first clients that I worked with, so it's had a special place in my heart. And he wanted to make sure he was worried that he would drink again, maybe. And so he wanted to make sure and put that into concrete that he could be done forever.
Hmm.
And that's another thing that I teach people. You don't ever have to drink again. You don't have to use drugs again if you don't want to. Um, there are other things, other ways of handling your life. And so he came to me for that reason. And once we had kind of talked about that, he mentioned that he was in the process of losing weight. And so really we started talking about that and about food and his addictions to sugar and how that was impacting him and how to how to get over that. And that's another big, huge one for a lot of people is sugar. And from my research, sugar is actually just as addictive as cocaine, believe it or not.
Hmm. I've
So
heard
that
that
was a hard
too.
one.
Ah,
Yeah, and then a lot of times this happens with people that are in addiction or in recovery from addictions. They'll jump on to another thing. So they'll like quit alcohol, but then they'll start, using pain pills or something, or switch to a food addiction or something like that. So with him, I was able to show him how his mind and how his thoughts were impacting that, and how that cycle can be stopped by just questioning your thoughts and
hmm.
kind of it's interesting our thinking because it seems like it would be kind of a simple thing to do to kind of change around the way that we're thinking about things. But about 90% of our thoughts are
Hmm.
subconscious. They're already delegated back into our midbrain. Like, for example, I'm not really thinking about what I'm saying to you because language is delegated to my midbrain, where it's like an automatic little program that just runs. And most of our thinking is like that too. So we have all of these subconscious thoughts about ourselves and about alcohol and drugs and the ways in which they're helping us.
Hmm.
And we can really become deflated, and we can become lost in these stories about ourselves that aren't true. Like
Yeah.
I was so lost, thinking that I was worthless, and that I was just this complete failure because I couldn't get my life together and I couldn't stop drinking.
Ah.
And I was blaming myself and I was full of guilt and shame. So I really love teaching people how to break that cycle and how to get out of those emotions that are not helpful.
Well, we have just 3 minutes left here on the show. How did you want to kind of end off for today for your listeners, for those out there who may be in need of help, suffering with addiction?
Yeah, I would love to just tell anybody out there that's suffering with this not to give up, and to absolutely you can do this. If
Hmm.
you want to get out of these cycles, there is a way, and you are so so worth it, and your life is
Yeah.
worth it. And I know that it is scary, but believe me, my life is a million times better now than it was. And I could have never imagined what was on the other side of this.
Wow.
And the same thing can be true for you
Hmm.
absolutely too. Just hang in there.
Perfect. And if we want to reach out one more time, remind us how we could do so. Thank you.
Yes, please find me at www.coachingwithshurone.com. And I would love to meet anyone who wants to work with me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure seeing
Thank
you
you,
here.
Jill.
Thank you for your positivity and for sharing your story. And I know it's a painful journey, but it's also bringing you much joy because you're helping so many down the same
Yes.
path you have been. So thank you for that. And you have a fantastic day and even better week, okay?
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. And to all of our listeners, please stay tuned. We'll be right back with more.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.